It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of good fortune must be in want of a wife. It's the opening line of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, one of the most famous opening lines of a novel ever. And apparently, someone at ABC took this quote to heart. My evidence? The Bachelor. For the last 15 years, viewers have watched as uniformly handsome farmers, bankers, athletes, actors, engineers, etc. search for a wife from a group of uniformly beautiful single women. And then ABC added a codicil to Jane Austen's original statement. A single woman jilted on national television must still be in want of a husband, and so added sister show The Bachelorette. The most recent incarnation of the show, The Bachelor in Paradise, features contestants who are sent home from their respective seasons. They're encouraged then at a beautiful beachside villa to find themselves a partner from the other rejected contestants. This is the show that I want to focus on today, as allegations of misconduct have shut down the production for the most recent season. The fate of the show itself remains in limbo, as the possibility of legal action lingers. The situation provides an interesting intersection to look at the different gender roles in reality TV, the way that the situation has unfolded and how those involved have responded, and the wider reaction to the event in particular and reality TV in general. One of the issues that has to be considered when discussing reality TV is the actual reality of it. Dabrowski and Hardy describe reality TV like this. We take as a premise that what happens on reality TV show is similar to what occurs on a scripted show, with the difference that the raw material creating the fiction of the reality TV series is footage of real people doing real things. The magic happens in the editing room, through the decisions of producers and TV workers. Another author, Dana Cloud, labels it the irony bribe. That is, the average viewer can consider a reality show like The Bachelor absolutely worthless on one hand, and absolutely worth viewing on the other. It can be considered both real and not real at the same time for the viewer, allowing for that distance to happen. Some people may fall on the more real side, some people fall on the more scripted side, but on the whole, this idea of what she labels the irony bribe takes place. What is interesting then is when actual reality ensues in reality television. Well, here's what we know about what's happened in The Bachelor in Paradise so far. On the night of June 4th, after a day of heavily drinking on set, an alleged sexual encounter took place between two contestants, Corinne Olympios and Demario Jackson. The next day, June 5th, an unnamed third party, presumably one of the field producers, saw the footage of what had happened and became uncomfortable with it. She then lodged a complaint with the higher-up producers and the production company. Fast forward just under a week later. On June 11th, Warner Brothers announces that they're shutting down production on this newest season of The Bachelor in Paradise to investigate the alleged misconduct. The entire cast and production team is sent home for Mexico. 2 days later, host Chris Harrison appears on Good Morning America, urging viewers to have patience as let the investigation run its course and to protect the privacy of the people involved, who had already been tentatively identified in the media as Corinne and Demario. On June 14th, they confirmed their involvement in the incident and both issued statements. These are the statements that I really want to focus on because I think they reveal something very important about the way that these gender roles and these gender differences are shown in reality television. I want to look really at three different things, three different ideas that are encapsulated in these statements. The first, the idea of rape, consent, and virtue. Second, the idea of reputation and representation. And finally, looking a little bit at the reaction of people to this sort of situation. So the first statement released on June 14th was that of Corinne Olympios. It reads, in part, I am a victim and have spent the last week trying to make sense of what happened on June 4th. Although I have little memory of that night, something bad obviously took place, which is why I understand why production on the show has now been suspended and a producer on the show has filed a complaint against the production. As a woman, this is my worst nightmare, and it has now become my reality. As I pursue the details and facts surrounding that night and the immediate days after, I have retained a group of professionals to ensure that what happened on June 4th comes to light, and I can continue my life, including hiring an attorney to obtain justice, seeking therapy to begin dealing with the physical and emotional trauma stemming from that evening. So her statement, I would like to pull really 2 or 3 different things out of her statement. First, she automatically assumes the role in the narrative of victim. She explicitly states that she doesn't remember what happened that night, but that her worst nightmare has now become reality. She automatically is assuming the role of a victim, assuming, for lack of further evidence, that she did not consent to the encounter and could not prevent it. In a way, this fits the narrative that was in one of the chapters of the book from the book that we read this week, that of the white female body being dominated by the black male body. It's another interesting twist to this situation in that Corinne is white, blonde, Demario Jackson is a black male. The possibility and the issues of race in this situation is an entirely different topic, one that I don't want to spend a ton of time on, but is definitely worth mentioning for this project. So she automatically assumes the submissive female traditional trope in her statement, automatically assuming that in the absence of explicit consent, she is the victim in the situation. I'd like to contrast that then with the idea of reputation and representation that are evident in Demario Jackson's statement, also issued later in the day on June 14th. His reads in part, "It's unfortunate that my character and family name have been assassinated this past week with false claims and malicious allegations. I will be taking swift and appropriate legal action until my name is cleared, and, per the advice of legal counsel, will be seeking all available remedies entitled to me under the law." What's interesting here is that he has an equal claim to victimhood in this situation. Again, both had been heavily drinking, presumably unable to consent to the encounter, and yet he doesn't present himself as a sexual victim. Instead, he presents himself as a victim of the situation. That is to say, his only victimhood is found in that he has been accused of this. I think going back to the earlier Dabrowski and Hardy article, they would argue that as a black male, he is represented on a traditionally white show. He is representative of more than himself. Therefore, issues of representation and race would weigh more heavily on his mind as opposed to the assumption of sexual victimhood. Finally, I'd like to look at some of the reactions that have come out. One former contestant, said she was surprised it took so long for something like this to happen, given the general nature of the show, the amount of alcohol produced, and the overall environment. Andy Denhart, a television critic, appeared on an NPR interview not long after and took a slightly different perspective. Instead, he questioned the role of the producers in all of this, saying that if this was a genuinely non-consensual encounter, producers should have stepped in instead of continuing to film. On the other hand, he says it could have been a planned storyline, one that simply got out of hand. This follows closely with one of the prominent reasons viewers reject reality TV in general. Scarborough and McCoy, in their study of the perceptions of morality in reality TV state, many who possess an exogenous locus of morality think that the entire reality TV industry is immoral. The actions of producers who exploit and portray characters in a negative light, and the program directors for television stations that choose to air reality programming are condemned. From this perspective, both Corinne and Demario are equally victims, not necessarily of the gendered sexual encounter that their own statements produce, but rather they're victims of they're victims of the production itself, in that they and their bodies, their roles and their actions are simply pawns and objectified and commodified for the producers then to use. So where do we go from here? Well, number one, the account of events has taken an interesting twist in the last day. Another cast member, as reported by E! Online, has come out to say that Corinne forced herself on 3 male cast members when they were unable to consent, direct quote, on the same day of the incident as Demario Jackson. If this is true, it potentially recasts her narrative from one trope, that of the innocent victim unable to prevent a sexual encounter, to the opposing trope, that of the female sex predator. Both of these are pre-existing tropes and pre-existing narratives for women in sexual situations. The other interesting thing is that neither party has actually seen the footage of the alleged event. The fact that such a tape exists, I think, raises larger questions of surveillance and the degree to which these gender roles are presented as performative rather than genuine. That is to say, it's Schrodinger's gender roles. Are these gender roles presented the way they are because that's the way they are, or are they presented as the way they are because that's the way the production presents them? I think there's a larger question there about the role of surveillance, gender roles, and how that's presented in reality TV as well. If you have any questions, please, I'd be happy to provide. I'll submit this along with the citations for the works that I've mentioned, and thank you for your time.